Hi, everyone. Today, we have Helevorn with us, and we are going to talk about introversion and how to write or how we wrote introverted characters.
Hi, everyone. Um, Introversion is one of my favorite subjects. So this is why I have a lot of characters that could fall into this category. But I think that what's important to think about is that introversion is a spectrum. So there are different ways in which one can be introverted. Not feeling comfortable expressing your feelings and thoughts or interacting with people often leads to misunderstandings, right? People not being able to get to know you, not knowing how to act around you. So I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about introverted people and how introversion can be misinterpreted as something else, like arrogance or lack of self-confidence, anxiety, modesty, hostility, and even ignorance. I had the misfortune to encounter that. I am without question an introvert, even though it may not be apparent in certain situations, either because I've learned how to hide it or because I have a lot of moments and people that make me genuinely feel comfortable, so I'm not even faking it. So, but introverted people are very different from one another. So, of course, they can be understood and perceived by others in different ways. So, well, because I've often acted strange in certain social situation, I myself have been called lots of things like, I don't know, weirdo, an asshole, stuck up, or holier than thou kind of person, and even stupid to my face. So yeah, I think it happens, and this is why I like so much to have introverted characters, because in writing I think that it makes for a very nice narrative, because you can show a discrepancy between how other people perceive them and how they actually think when you show their thoughts, and it's one of my favorite things to do, to show this contrast between
Hmm.
the outside, the outer appearance, and their inner world. So this is why I have at least four characters that qualify as introverts.
And I think, as we know, the most well-known one of your characters that's an introvert is Yngvar from Lucky Wolf.
Oh yes, definitely. Definitely. I think that Ingvar is in a way the most introverted person I have, in the sense that well, he meets a lot of those telling signs of being an introvert. So he thinks more than he speaks. He's the silent type, the one who doesn't talk nonsense, and he only says what is absolutely important to say, and nothing more. He doesn't like talking about himself, and he cannot express his feelings. He has great trouble expressing his feelings, even when he really wants to, even when he is in situations when he would like to say something about how he feels, because he sees that he is misunderstood, and he doesn't want to be misunderstood, but he really cannot. He fails in doing so. So in this respect, I think uh, he's the most introverted person. He also likes thinking a lot. He has um, he thinks a lot before he acts, before he makes decisions, even though it's not always apparent, because from the outside he seems very determined and willful, but he does um, like spending a lot of time in his own head, because he prefers doing that than talking to other people. So he's definitely a loner. He doesn't really have friends, and even the one friend that he has, Håkon, well, they don't talk a lot. Their interactions usually consist in Håkon talking, and Yngvar just being monosyllabic about it. So um, this is this is how he is, but from the outside I don't think that people really see him as an introvert in his maturity. So well, here I like to play a bit with that Norse hero kind of a trope, because the strong silent type was fashionable in that time, and I think it remained fashionable for a long time as the way to be of a warrior and of a nobleman. So this is how he is perceived, and because he is determined and he's used to giving orders, he isn't pegged as an introvert. And also he's very intimidating. This is how he's perceived by others, and very demanding. So he has this way of acting that he makes people feel they are substandard, because this is the way in which he was raised. So this sort of comes natural to him to bring criticism to people, and rarely praise someone for what they do. So this is one other reason why he isn't obviously introverted. So definitely not introverted in a dysfunctional way. So like I have other characters who are quite dysfunctional in society. Ingvar is on the opposite side. He's highly functional.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we're talking about personal relations, like I don't know, romantic relationships. There he is very dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
But in other sorts of situation, no, he's very in control of everything.
Makes sense. Yeah. So, how would you say that Ingvar's introversion compares with Aidan's, for example?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, Aidan is well, he's different in the sense that he doesn't really like meeting new people, and he also has a very rich inner world, and he a rich imagination, and he likes thinking a lot about uh, out of the ordinary things, so things that are remote from his immediate surroundings. And I think that the main reason why Aidan doesn't speak a lot is because he thinks that people would not understand him. um, Maybe like Yngvar, maybe he has a degree of arrogance, in the sense that it's not that he finds himself uninteresting, but he thinks that people are not able to comprehend those things, so he
Mm-hmm.
finds it pointless to talk about them. Which is of course true if we think that Aidan is a scholar, is a monk in a place and time where most people are illiterate, and most people think only about their immediate environment, and don't often ask themselves questions like how is the world made, why is this happening, so even if they do ask themselves the questions, but they don't find scientific answers, and they don't have access um, to those scientific answers. So in a way he is right, but well, this is one of the reasons why he doesn't talk. Of course, he is also placed in a situation where he is a nobleman turned into a slave in that country where most people are illiterate. So he he's passive aggressive in his behavior. He's angry about what he became, compared to what
Mm-hmm.
he could have become if he remained a scholar and a nobleman in his own country. So maybe this is why he's like this. But um, so even if he seems a bit hostile, or he is a bit hostile in the beginning, he would very much like to be understood, and to have friends, and to have people who want to talk to him, and who are interested in what he has to say. I think that he would make a great teacher, because he would like to teach other people what he knows and what he finds fascinating, and share it with them. So when he starts meeting new people and making friends, he actually likes talking. So he becomes, well, not so obviously introverted. um, he eventually makes friends and he doesn't have a problem communicating with them, and he doesn't really have a problem expressing his feelings. He's not like Yngvar. He wasn't really taught to suppress his feelings, so he doesn't find anything wrong, and he doesn't find any barrier between himself and putting his words in his feelings into words. And also he has a way with words because he likes reading and all that. So uh, it's actually quite easy for him to express his feelings.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty interesting because I think Yngvar and Aidan actually have a lot of similarities with one of my characters, Joel, who also seems on the surface not very introverted like Yngvar, because he always goes around telling people what his opinions are, particularly his political opinions, because Joel is very left-leaning, and if he was modern, he might be like leaning close to Antifa, not throwing bricks or anything, but his views are pretty similar. And he's someone who is extremely anti-fascist in modern setting, and he's just anti anything that he perceives as xenophobic or, you know, particularly hostile towards minorities, since he is a minority himself, and he deals with a lot of social justice issues as a way of asserting his identity. So the thing about Joel is that I think that he is very insecure deep down, because he used to be bullied in elementary school for being too quiet and too sheltered, and people would think that there was something wrong with him because sometimes he didn't reply to people or didn't reply enough when people asked him a question. So he became the butt of many jokes in his class.
I see, that's really interesting. So he has, in a way, trained himself to be the way he is now, because I didn't realize how introverted Joel actually is. So because he's so opinionated.
Mm-hmm. I think he always had strong opinions. It was just that he was afraid to voice them, because I think he also dealt with a stutter when he was younger. So every time he said something that was for a longer sentence, for example, he would start stuttering and people would look at him and he would feel very self-conscious.
I see, that's really interesting. Yeah, that's definitely something that would make a child feel insecure if he gets looks from people because of it. But once he started growing up and becoming more mature, he overcame it, right? And even his stutter. Does he still stutter?
Yes, he does sometimes when he gets too excited or confused or too tired.
Oh, I see, I see. Well, he's really come a long way, because he has strong, not only that he has strong opinions because he always had them, but he doesn't seem to have a problem expressing them.
Yeah, I think he pushes himself to do it because he doesn't want to be that kid who was bullied anymore, right? So when he goes to middle school, he starts pushing himself to express himself more, and that leads to him becoming increasingly opinionated. And people start thinking, wow, this guy is just way too over the top. And this is what he was aiming for, because he wanted people to have a different opinion on him, not just the quiet kid who, I don't know, people think that he has problems because he doesn't reply to people enough.
That's right. So actually, this is a very interesting contrast between how he was when he was younger and how he feels inside about his insecurities and the image that he gives off. Because those people who know him when he gives speeches and when he's in class in university or when he is at those gatherings actually find him self-confident, very self-confident, right?
I think for the most part, yes, especially people who don't know him very well or think too much about his behavior, because some parts of his behavior do indicate that he isn't that secure, because a truly secure person wouldn't have as many insecurities as he does. There's always a tendency on Joel's behalf to not listen to people and butt into conversations, which a lot of truly confident people wouldn't feel the need to, because they already feel like, you know, they are worthy. but Joel always feels like he has to interrupt people and then always tell people what he thinks and not listen to people because he always wants to prove that he's important.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So he always wants to prove something.
And that comes off as insecure to people who understand this kind of thinking more. I think for people who don't think about this sort of thing that much, they might not notice that about him.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe quite the opposite. Maybe it feels like he interrupts because he is annoyed by how stupid everyone else is and how only
Mm-hmm.
his opinion is valid enough to be heard.
Exactly. That's another way of viewing it. But for people who struggled with these issues themselves, like for Sam, for example, who also struggled with reinventing himself to make himself more suitable to, public consumption because he always wanted to be famous. And with his older personality, which is not as quiet as Joel was, but he was still not popular enough, right? He was just ordinary. He had to pretty much push himself to be more talkative and more interesting than he actually is to project the image he wants to project. So for someone like Sam who did something similar himself, he can see that Joel is actually not confident.
Oh, that's right. That's right. So someone who has a similar kind of struggle can recognize this behavior in him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How is Joel in terms of expressing his feelings, so not only his thoughts and opinions, but talking about his feelings?
His feelings, I think mostly he just talks about his anger and his indignation at social injustice. Like he doesn't talk about any other emotions he has, only the angry side. So people just think, oh, he's that guy who gets angry at different things, and he's very sensitive about certain things. Like he thinks someone is insulting him and he's like, oh, and he gets all passive aggressive about it. So I mean, people who know him well, they can definitely see he's not very confident because sometimes he just picks fights with people just to prove a point.
Okay, I see. I see. That's really interesting. He does have certain things in common with Ingvar because Ingvar also projects an image of self-confidence and even aggression at times. So and in fact, they are hiding certain insecurities.
Mm-hmm. They are, yeah. I think how do Joel and Aidan compare? Do you think they both kind of project the belief or people thinking that they are arrogant?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, this is a good question. I think that they are both opinionated, but the difference is that Aiden doesn't express his opinions that loudly. Well, maybe it's the context as well because Aiden doesn't really find the right place and the right people with which to have these conversations. But yeah, even though he has strong opinions, he doesn't have Joel's way of expressing them. So not even when he is at the monastery. I don't think that. Well, he would enjoy debates, but well, he cannot really debate with the older priest there. So, but he would if he could, and um, I think he does that for a while, but he's not seen as a very nice person because of it. So he stops because he doesn't want to be I don't know, bad mouth all the time
Mm-hmm,
because of it.
mm-hmm,
So I think that they do have a lot of things in common, but Joel is much more extreme in this sense, in the way he expresses his feelings, his opinion, sorry. And also about the arrogance, yes, I think so. I think so. I think that they both seem quite arrogant, but Joel much more so
mm-hmm,
because Aiden doesn't really butt in conversations and interrupt people. I think that he just makes faces, and people who know him and who see him realize that he is displeased, or he thinks, ah, these people are so stupid, but he doesn't really say and he doesn't interrupt people.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Joel would definitely come off as arrogant because, he's always interrupting people. And he does have the propensity to speak at very quick like a very quick speed. For example, like when he starts debating, he gets very excited and he starts talking like a machine gun, as some people could describe it in modern day. Like, you know, he just talks very fast and he doesn't leave any room for anyone to reply to him.
Oh, I know, that's right. Yeah, this is really interesting because it's not a type of behavior uh, really associated with introversion. I think that for the most part, we would think about it differently, right? If someone who is very loud and speaks all the time, oh, that person is definitely extroverted. But it's not. It's not as simple as this.
Mm-hmm. I think that Joel is kind of tired out by too much social interaction. So that makes him essentially an introvert, because even though he's always taking part in these debates afterwards, I don't think he talks to anyone else. He might just talk to his parents or Sam or Frankie, but then he just goes to sleep or something.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, indeed, indeed. So being introverted also means that you are drained by too much interaction with people. So yeah, that's definitely one way in which he is a typical introvert.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing about Joel is that, I don't know if your characters are like this, but this is not really introverted. Like, it's not really tied to his introversion, but he's a very sensitive person who deals a lot with his personal demons of, you know, insecurity and jealousy. Not only is he an insecure person because he was bullied, he struggles a lot with jealousy.
Ah, yes. He's a lot like Aiden in this respect.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if Aidan is as jealous as he is, but he's very jealous of people who, you know, have their shit together, as he would say it. You know, people who are more naturally sociable, as he senses it, or people who are just more comfortable with themselves. Because Joel doesn't like his own stutter. He doesn't like his height because he's shorter than average. He doesn't like how skinny he is. He doesn't like how he pretty much doesn't have an identity of his own other than the strong politics. And he really wants to have a strong direction in life, and he hates it when people like Sam, for example, have all these goals and stuff like that, and he gets angry because he doesn't really have a goal. He just wants to be quote unquote normal and have a stable middle class life, but he doesn't know how to achieve this either. So he just goes through university and all the motions that people usually go through, but in the end he's not driven by any goal or like identity or anything like Sam has. And he's kind of jealous, and he gets angry at Sam for always talking about what he really wants in life, because Joel doesn't know what he wants in life. And he thinks, that's how most people are, Sam. Why do you always have to shove it in people's faces that you're so passionate about this? Most people aren't passionate about anything. And no, there's no guarantee you will be successful, Sam. So why are you so arrogant about what you want? That's how he sees it.
I see now what you mean. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, definitely. He comes off as really mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does Sam think he's mean when he acts like this? Like,
Yes.
stop pretending you are so interesting. You're not the only one.
Yeah, I mean, he does think he is mean because he's not like this when he's in high school, but as they grow older together, you know, when they're in their 20s, Joel becomes increasingly like this because he doesn't know what he's doing with his life, and Sam doesn't know what he's doing with his life, but he's still talking about the theater, which kind of makes Joel angry because it's like it's unrealistic, and it also makes Joel feel bad about his own lack of passion for anything in his life.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's really interesting. No, he's not like Aiden in this respect. Yeah.
It's something that
Yeah.
he struggles with. He knows that it's a bad trait to have, but he can't control it. And sometimes his tongue just kind of escapes his control, and he just says something mean. And he feels bad about it, but it already came out, and he's like, oh, well, if Sam doesn't want to be friends with me, I can understand. You know, I'm not the nicest person to be around.
I see. So he is very self-conscious about. He's definitely self-conscious because he thinks a lot about himself and constantly compares himself with other people and things that he is not interesting enough, not doesn't have enough passion. So yeah, he's definitely self-conscious enough to also realize that his behavior was wrong when he does something like this.
Which gives him a lot of guilt, because he always felt like the third wheel in the friendship between him, Frankie, and Sam. Because Frankie and Sam were always closer and kinder to each other than he ever was with either of them. So he's like, I kind of deserve this. I'm just a bitter guy who just sucks at socializing. But then at the same time, he just feels bad that he doesn't have any other friends other than these two. But then he still treats them badly because of his own complexes and insecurities. So he has a lot of conflicted emotions about his friendships.
This is one more thing to add to his list of insecurities.
He has a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I see. Yeah, this is interesting. Do you have any other characters who are introverted, clearly introverted?
I would say Katya is also very introverted, and Frankie.
Right, all right. In what way is Katya introverted?
I think she, like some of your other characters, she prefers not to talk too much about herself or her own opinions because she doesn't think it's very interesting. And she also feels just tired all the time because she's always working at the factory sweatshop. So she doesn't really have that much time to express herself or think that anyone wants to hear what she says, especially since she wants to have more time to prepare for presenting herself, but she doesn't, and she's too tired.
Right, so she is also drained by social interactions, but not only that, she is actually tired also physically, right, after her hard day at work, and so interacting with people would just add to that tiredness, right?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
I see. How is Katya about is expressing her feelings?
I think generally she doesn't express her feelings that much because like I said before, she thinks she's not that important. So who would actually care outside of her family, right? Or maybe one or two friends, especially people at work. They're all being pushed by the people at work, the managers, to produce as many things as possible in the factory. They don't have time to talk about themselves. So I think because she's worked there for so long, she kind of got used to not expressing herself and just kind of seeing herself as a machine of sorts.
I see, I see. And well, would you say that she's insecure?
I would say so, yes, but not in the same way as Joel is. I think Joel has more complexes than she does. I think she is insecure about her position in life as someone who is, quote unquote, fated to be at the bottom of society, just kind of being used by these people working at the factory to produce as many things as possible. And she thinks her life doesn't really matter because she's so insignificant. And just with the rest of the workers there as well, they're just so disregarded. They're not really their stories are not being told. They're just being worked to death basically.
So she's sort of resigned to this low position in life, and she's resigned to not being taken into account and not being found interesting enough.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
I see. How would Katya react to hearing Joel talk about working classes and discrimination? Would she feel, I don't know, empowered by it, or would she find it weird that he talks about these things so loudly?
I think she would listen to him, but then at the end she would think he's privileged because he is sort of working class, but not like she is. Like there's different types of working classes, and most people living on the Lower East Side were some sort of working class, but then she's definitely more at the bottom than he is because he had the privilege to go to university because he did win a scholarship, even though his parents weren't rich enough to pay for his tuition, but he got the scholarship to go to university, just like Sam did. So in a way, she sees them as more privileged because she didn't even finish high school. She had to come out and work, but then they finished high school and then they went straight into university. So she feels like, yeah, they came from the same neighborhood, but they don't really understand the struggle because they never worked at a factory before.
That makes a lot of sense. So would you think that Joel is a bit entitled to take it upon himself to talk about the struggles of the working classes, even if he's not really part of that life and he hasn't really had the experience that a factory worker, for instance, had?
Yeah, I think so. But then she thinks it's kind of useful because, their voices need to be made louder. So people like Joel are helping them to make their voices louder. And I think maybe she would think that Lev, Sam's father, has more of a say, even though he doesn't run a factory or is, he's not a factory worker, but he is a small business owner. So he at least has some kind of working experience to stand on. And he prints a lot of these things, these pamphlets and stuff advocating for workers' rights. So I think she would be more in line with Lev than with Joel. Because Joel, he doesn't own a printing press or anything. He's just talking out of his mouth.
That's right. That's right. He's talking about things that he's never really experienced. So.
Mm-hmm. It's just basically a way for him to vent about because he always feels like he's being overlooked for certain things. So it's like basically a way for him to rant about how he feels like he's not part of society at large because he feels inadequate.
Definitely. And also himself as a person was often overlooked, right? Especially when he was younger. So not necessarily because of anything in his background, but it's also something subjective as well, not only ideological, for example.
Exactly. And for Joel, this is another reason why he's so patriotic, because compared to Sam and the other characters, Joel is the guy who walks around, like if he was modern, wearing an American t-shirt, like the American flag on his hat. Like he's obsessed with patriotism because he wants to be part of something bigger. But he doesn't know what that is. For Sam, that's the theater. But for Joel, he doesn't know what to latch onto. So it's politics, and then it's his patriotism.
I see. So maybe Katya, being more unassuming, wouldn't be judgmental of Joel, even if they don't have a lot of things in common. But maybe she would feel that it's good that someone who's been to university and who is so well spoken and so opinionated is there to voice their struggles and worries, even if he doesn't really share them.
Exactly. I think she would be kind of annoyed at him, to be honest, and maybe like a little bit irritated because he's always constantly interrupting people. And she, being quiet, would find that like he's arrogant because he's not letting her a chance to talk. For someone like her, you would have to be more patient and actually pause between sentences for her to get, a chance to talk back to you. But Joel, speaking so fast and always interrupting people, just wouldn't let someone like her talk.
That makes so much sense, and that is actually so relatable. I can totally understand um, Katya's displeasure with this kind of behavior, because even though they both have this degree of introversion, they behave in a very different way. So much that even Katya would find him arrogant, even though she could understand him, but his behavior is so different from her when it comes to speaking in public and to voicing opinions that not even she recognizes that he's actually an introvert deep down.
Yeah, he is. And I think that would really shock her. She's like, what? Really? But yeah, I think she would have to be like, she would probably talk to like, I don't know, someone who studies psychology and think more about it. And there's different types of introversion. So that makes more sense because it is very different.
Yeah, that's really true. That's really true. Yeah, I think Katya has a lot of things in common from this point of view with my character Merwyn, who is Aidan's mother. And she is a much more extreme kind of Aidan. And like Katya, she is quiet and quite unassuming because she doesn't like talking about herself. She doesn't like being the center of attention. She much rather preferred to live in the world in her head rather than the real world. She has a very rich imagination, and I think she is the most typical kind of introvert because she is that dreamer person that everyone says that, oh, you're not involved in things around you enough. And she is very silent because I think that she doesn't, well, she feels very intimidated when people don't let her speak. And She is the anxious type of introvert. Um, because she is even intimidated by her stepson, who is 12 years old, Edgar, Aiden's brother. So this is how intimidated she is by other people. It's only her son's company that she ever enjoys, and briefly that of her lover Halvard, while their relationship lasted. So the more pressure she feels upon her to act normal, the more she freezes when she has to speak. So yeah, when she feels that, oh, now I have to say something, and she feels other people's eyes on her, then her mind goes blank. So so I think she would just, I don't know, stammer, simply remain totally silent when she is asked something. So um, this is interpreted as very weird by most people. So I think that those who don't know her well, like, well, she is a noblewoman, right? She is the wife of the alderman of Northumbria. So their retainers, the commoners, mostly think that she is a modest and discreet woman and the perfect Christian wife, the perfect Christian noblewoman. Um, so she doesn't like standing out a lot, so she will wear quite modest clothes, um not a lot of jewelry and things like that, so never boast about her social status. And they think that she is kind and morally upstanding and just does her thing in silence. So this is a positive way in which she is perceived. And the negative way is, of course, how her husband unfortunately perceives her, because he finds her very strange, and he finds the way that she freezes when she has to say or to do something extremely annoying. He's very impatient with everybody who is not uh, quote unquote normal and highly functional, and people who are not as dynamic as he is and as
Mm-hmm.
he wants people to be. So and from a woman he would expect her to I don't know, to speak a lot, and well, not so much, and not in the sense that it becomes annoying, but just to always be nice and talkative, and take care of him, and ask him how he feels, what he wants her to do for him. This is the kind of wife that she would like. And Merwin really is not that kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
And he finds her also very cold, cold for a woman, for a wife. And this is another thing that he dislikes about her. So um, he he also sees her as hostile. So on the one hand, he sees her as very unassuming, and on the other, he sees her as quite hostile, because she acts very cold towards him and towards people in general. And he finds her so weird in the way that she phases out and is not doesn't pay attention to things that go on around her, that uh, he believes that she is crazy. And he really dislikes when Aidan acts like her, and he thinks that Aidan is too much like her and little like himself, which, well, if we consider that he might not be his biological father, then it's normal, but he finds it all the more annoying. And this is why the three of them have a very hostile relationship, with Merwin and Aidan on the one hand and the alderman on the other. And he's sure that she poisoned their son against him. So yeah, it's mostly her introversion that makes their interactions so hostile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or mostly how he reacts to her introversion, we should say.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, because he doesn't understand it at all. He finds it
Mm-hmm.
so strange and so annoying. So he has the worst reaction to introversion.
Mm-hmm. He does. How about Halvard? How does he see Merwyn's introversion?
Oh yeah, Halvard is really a fortunate situation where he finds her, well, very different from what the older man finds her. He doesn't think that she's silent because she has nothing to say. On the contrary, he finds her extremely interesting, and he tells her at one point that she is like an iceberg, so that there is not much on the surface. She is discreet on the surface, but there is so much underneath that he wants to discover. And this is what she really loves about him, because he is the first person who thought that about her and who also told her, since her her personality was never really understood, not by her parents and definitely not by her husband. So when he sees her in that way, she really likes it.
Mm-hmm.
He finds that she is very profound compared to most people who are just talk and action and just talk and act before they think. He thinks that she thinks a lot and she has a lot of interesting things to say if given the chance to listen, and this is what he wants to do. So he asks her a lot about herself, and with him she can talk about herself eventually. Well,
Mm-hmm.
quite quickly if we think about it, because he fortunately he is an extrovert, a clear extrovert, and he voices his feelings for her and his thoughts about her quite from the beginning. So this is what makes her come out of her shell.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like how Sam and Katya will be interacting, I think.
Yes, exactly. I wanted to ask you exactly this: if Katya would react in a different in a similar way if someone came to her and asked her about her. So, what do you think about this? What's your opinion? What are you thinking right now? What do you feel? I think that she would also be quite eager to finally express her feelings once she overcomes that initial shyness.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that she feels like she's too ignorant to have an opinion because she didn't finish her education and all she's known is working in a factory.
That's right. I think that that's quite a problem. Does she feel intimidated by Sam because of it?
I think so because he's involved in a lot of things that she has no clue about. I mean, she probably hasn't been to the theater. I mean, maybe once, but like she's not always going like he is. And she doesn't know about the stuff that he thinks about, all these social movements, all these ideas, law school. That really scared her when she first learned that he was a law student.
Does it make her feel uncomfortable when she has to talk? Like, is she afraid that he will find her ignorant?
Yes, definitely.
So how does he get her to get out of her shell and to start expressing her thoughts?
I think what happens is that after their chance meeting in front of Feingold's, when he splashes her with the car, he takes her home, and then afterwards he does bump into her again at Harvey's Deli at Feingold's, and then they start talking. They introduce themselves a bit more, and I don't think Sam at that point he really doesn't like law school, so he doesn't talk about the fact that he's a law student. So that doesn't scare her, but she finds out later, and I think by that point she's more comfortable with Sam, so she doesn't feel that intimidated by it. But if she had met him in his capacity as a law student, I don't think she would say much to him.
That's right. Yeah, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's interesting because it's very different. So in a way, she's similar to Merwyn, but in another, it's very different. At least the interaction between them is different because with Merwyn and Halvard, well, she doesn't feel intimidated by the fact I mean by any kind of social difference between them, because she has the higher rank and the higher education. The difference is that he is very street smart while she was extremely sheltered. So this is the way in which he has the upper hand, we can say, and in the fact that he's more self-confident and more outgoing and always seems to know what to say and what to do, while she is afraid that she doesn't know how to behave and people will find her weird. But this is where it stops. She doesn't really, I mean, she doesn't at all find herself, I don't know, intellectually inferior, for example. So it's not that. That
Mm-hmm.
is different in this sense.
I think Sam's the one who's more sheltered compared to Katya, especially with his overbearing parents and the fact that, he's been in a very controlled environment for the most of his life, while Katya was pretty much on her own because after she immigrated from Russia a few years later, her father died in a freak accident inside the what's it called? The factory.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
So because
see.
of
So
that,
she's on
she was
her
pretty much on
own,
her own with her sister and her mother has always been, emotionally unstable. Not like Valdez, but like in a very sad and melancholy way. Like she just kind of wastes away when she's not working. She's always so depressed and, she feels like there's no future. And that really affects how Katya and her sister Lisa sees themselves. That's why they feel so hopeless.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's definitely a very sad situation with one of the parents dying and the other being constantly depressed. That definitely has an impact on the way she views life for herself and life in general.
Mm-hmm. And that's in contrast to Sam. And, she kind of, before she knows that they are very controlling, she thinks Sam's very lucky to have such, quotes, in her words, loving parents. She doesn't know about the controlling and the codependency and stuff, but she thinks he's very lucky to have grown up, without his parents dying or disappearing, or, and then his parents are not depressed. They're running a successful, from her perspective anyways, a successful small business.
Definitely, and with her and with his parents supporting him to go to university and to make a good career for himself, whereas she didn't have the luxury to do that.
Mm-hmm. So that's why she always feels a little bit uncomfortable if Sam invites her to, let's say an evening at the speakeasy with him, Frankie, and the others. She doesn't know what to say to them because they're all so different from her.
That's right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So even when she comes out of her shell with Sam, she still feels uncomfortable with his friends, right?
Mm-hmm. Especially Joel.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think she really wonders and even asks Sam, why are you friends with this guy? I think he clearly doesn't like you. There's something about, your interest in the theater really pisses him off.
What does Sam respond to that?
I think he's like, yeah, but then we've known each other for so long. He's like, I'm just gonna wait it out. If he continues acting like this and he doesn't fix his behavior in a few months, I don't think I'm gonna talk to him anymore.
Yeah, yeah, but Sam has known Joel for so long that I think that he doesn't take him as seriously as Katya does. So he's,
Yeah.
oh, it's just Joel, don't mind him. He always is pissed off about something. So it doesn't mean that he actually hates me. It's just Joel.
Yeah, but I think Katya can sense that Joel is becoming increasingly hateful because he does when his life gets increasingly worse because, I don't know, I haven't really thought about it yet, but he does go through some stuff in his early 20s and that's when he gets increasingly indignant and angry about everything. So that is when his and Sam's friendship goes on the rocks. It's
Oh,
not
I
that
see.
great, yeah.
How would Joel be towards Katya, given that she represents that category of people that he talks for?
I think
So
he would
does
I
he
think
like her? Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I think would he like her? That's a good question. I think he likes her as an idea. I'm not really sure if Joe wants to interact with her per se as a person and actually ask her about her experiences. I think he would ask her about her experiences, but it's in a very impersonal way, not in like, oh yeah, I'm really concerned about you, but like he wants to get more information out of her so he can add this information to his campaign and like, his stuff and his
Oh,
speeches.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I imagine it like this. So she is just something that he can research and not really listen to or care about.
Mm-hmm. And me and Tate were thinking about, remember we were doing that RP with like, her characters like Andre and the others on the Lower East Side. So we've been writing a little bit into this RP. And Joel and Joel and Sam are currently competing for the affections of Sasha, who works at Gerda's bakery. And basically Joel doesn't really like her either. Like, he just does it because he wants to piss off Sam. Like, he's talking to her and asking her out because he wants to piss off Sam.
Oh, because it's like a competition between them, and he wants to prove that he's better than Sam is and more interesting than Sam is, right?
Exactly, because he does have, a chip on his shoulder. And at this point in the thing, in the RP, he's around 21 or 20 years old. And that's when he starts getting a little bit pissed off about a lot of things because of his family issues and the fact that he's afraid of not being able to get the job he's always wanted. Because in high school, he always wanted to be a lawyer, but he couldn't get into law school. But Sam did because he had higher marks in certain grades. But Joel didn't, so he just chose to become an accountant, which is not something he always wanted. So he gets frustrated too.
Right,
He sees
I
Sam
see.
as living the life he wanted to live, and he hates Sam for basically being able to go to law school but not even wanting to do it, because he would have gone to law school. He said, I would have made a great lawyer. And Sam, I don't know why you got into law school and you're not even trying.
Right, that's true. That's true. So he sort of finds Sam ungrateful for what he has and throwing it all away for a dream when this is someone else's dream, his own.
This is why he's so obsessed with debate, because he always wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah, I see. I see. But it does satisfy him, right? The debate. So he should find some comfort in that. Maybe if he were more successful and acclaimed by a lot of people, that would be enough for him and compensate for the fact that he isn't a lawyer.
I think he might run for like some kind of political position. For example, like, I don't know if he can run for mayor. Probably not until he's older.
Oh yeah, that's right. But the leader of some union, maybe,
hmm
I don't know, workers. I don't know if it counts because it's not a worker, so I have no idea what he can do.
I'm not sure either. So that's why he's so frustrated, because he's in this unenviable position where he doesn't know what he wants. And he's on the path to becoming an accountant, but does he want it? He's not sure.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
hmm
Mm. Okay, so do you have any other characters who you think are a bit introverted or who have this kind of a little part of the spectrum?
I would say that Frankie is kind of introverted, even though he doesn't really appear to be the typical kind of introvert, because he doesn't speak that much. Yes, he is very friendly and very sociable when he needs to be, but I think he prefers to be with a smaller group of people, not in front of a huge group of people, because he always feels like he's overwhelmed by a lot of things in his life. Frankie has had to deal with a lot of tragedy in his life, and with his parents taking out a lot of loans and getting him into a lot of economic trouble, especially with their restaurant, he has a lot of things to manage. He's the oldest child. He has to take care of the siblings and a lot of other things, so much that he doesn't really have time to just be himself and kind of put himself out there.
Okay, I see. So he's the kind of person who only has a very small circle of friends and doesn't really feel bad about it. It is the way he prefers it.
hmm
I see. Having a restaurant, how does he feel about interacting with people there?
He's
So
fine
I
with
don't
that.
keep his clientele by being nice and helpful with people, and he's okay with this kind of interaction.
Yes, he's okay with that kind of interaction, because it depends on what he's doing. For example, if he's at the restaurant, he's perfectly fine with interacting with anyone, or a large number of people. But if he's at the speakeasy and he has to put on a show about being really charismatic or anything like that, I think he feels very pressured, because he's not in his elements, so to speak. He's the kind of person who feels more comfortable around people he knows and the kind of environment he's used to. But in a new environment, I think he just becomes really quiet.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah, that's so relatable to a lot of introverts. I mean, in some situations, they seem totally well, perfectly comfortable in social interactions, and in others, when taken out of their element, they they suddenly turn quiet.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Do you think Aiden and Ingvar are like this?
Aiden, yes, definitely. Aiden is definitely like this, yes, because it depends on where he is, and I think that for the most part of his life, he sort of stops expecting to ever have friends, so he gets used to being alone and not having any friends because um, paradoxically, until he is in Norway, even though he's a slave, he doesn't have any kind of friends, that he feels sort of comfortable with it. But once he starts getting along with Helgi and Lars, then he realizes how much he actually loves the company of people. So
Mm-hmm.
and also Yngvar. So
Mm-hmm.
once he starts talking to them, and when someone is nice to him and in a way that is not intimidating or putting pressure, or I don't know, wanting to get something out of him, then he really likes conversation. So even with someone like Hakon, who is so relaxed when interacting with Aiden, and I don't know, treats him in a, well, very friendly way, then he immediately opens up. Well, not really immediately, but much more than before. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he also has the he has it in him to open up once he starts feeling comfortable.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
How is Frankie about expressing his feelings? So does he hide his feelings, and does he like to dissimulate, pretend that, I don't know, he is other than he, in a different way, something else, or
I think he usually pretends to be feeling fine when he actually isn't. Because of the situation his family and his restaurant is in a lot of the time, he's panicking about a lot of things, having to pay off a loan or like some kind of other issue that pops up, well, which I'll tell you guys about more next time. But basically, he has to struggle with a lot of things that he doesn't tell people about, and he doesn't want people to think that he's involved in anything shady. He's not. But then, when people think about loans and stuff, some people might think that's shady, especially when it's related to a restaurant and stuff like that. So then, like, he doesn't want to ruin his own reputation, so to speak. So he doesn't talk about it. I mean, other than Sam, and he only tells Sam once they get really, really close, which is much later in the visual novel. Like, yeah, they've been friends since high school, but they don't really. I mean, he doesn't really want to tell Sam about it because he feels like Sam's very sheltered, and Sam has a lot of different experiences that I don't think he will be able to understand me because I've gone through so much crap, and a lot of people haven't seen this side of society that I don't think it's worth scaring them to tell them about it. So he only expresses the part of himself that he feels like doesn't intimidate or scare people off. So he just comes off as very relaxed, kind of quiet, but not really quiet because he does make small talk. It's just that he never really ends up revealing a lot about himself. Every time he talks about things, he's always talking about the most general things like, how's the food? Did you eat yet? How's the weather? How are you doing? And he always directs the questions back at the other person. He doesn't really reveal that much about himself. So you can talk to Frankie for like 3 to 4 hours, and you only know that he works at a restaurant. You don't really know much about him other than that.
that's so interesting. That's so interesting. So he has developed these interaction techniques that um, uh, don't don't make him talk about the aspects of his life that he wants to keep secret.
Exactly. And he does this because, and I think it's also influencing how he sees intimacy because, he's developed all of these ways of deflecting questions about himself. So he doesn't know how to progress beyond this. And he's afraid of losing his temper or coming off as really angry or really desperate about something if he gets the opportunity to actually express his emotions.
Right, I see. I see. Yeah, that's interesting. He is a quite a bit like my character Lars, I think. I mean, not in this in their backgrounds, because Lars definitely doesn't have the kind of problems that Frankie has, and that also influenced Frankie's way in which he interacts with other people. But rather in the sense that in certain situations he doesn't appear introverted at all. So
Mm-hmm.
it depends on the kind of situation he is and how comfortable he feels with the people around him, and in that certain moment, and otherwise he can be very introverted. So Lars is a peasant, one of the boys who goes to England to raid the monastery, and even though they met in a very unfortunate context, he and Aidan become friends later on, because Lars and Helgi are very friendly with him, and never treat him like that there is any kind of difference between them. And well, Lars generally doesn't like meeting new people because he doesn't like talking about himself. So in this respect, he is a bit like Katya as well. He thinks that he isn't interesting enough to say something, that he's just a regular guy. And this is why he doesn't want to stand out and doesn't want to be the center of attention. He feels much more comfortable with people who already know him, and he feels okay talking about, I don't know, regular things like the the weather, the fields, the animals, or something like that. But he starts feeling uncomfortable if he has to talk about things that he's conscious that he doesn't know a lot about. Like this is particularly manifested when he talks to Yngvar or Aidan, whom he finds pretty intimidating for different reasons. Yngvar because he is, well, the boss, so to speak, and because they work for him, and also because he's seen as this hero type, this perfect warrior and nobleman, and he is intimidated because he finds him as an ideal that he will never be able to reach. So this is why he feels intimidated by Yngvar. But by Aidan, it's mostly because his intuition tells him that Aidan is intellectually superior to everyone he knows, and this is what makes him intimidated. Which means that he is actually very self-conscious about his own condition and his own uh, shortcomings, and his own, well, not by his own fault, but I don't know, his station in life that he cannot overcome. And it's which is different, because someone like Helgi, who has exactly the same background as Lars, never thinks about it in that way, because he's not as self-conscious as Lars is. So Lars is another one of those introverts that is highly self-conscious, to the point that they become shy or unassuming with people that they think are superior to them. So someone they admire, for example. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, I think in a way he is a lot like Katya.
Yeah, you're
And
right. He is. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and he doesn't have Joel's way of dealing with this insecurity and with this fear that he is not interesting enough. He's much more unassuming than Joel is, and he would never be like that.
Mm-hmm. How about Frankie? How does he compare with your introverted characters?
Hmm. Frankie. Yeah, well, I think that Frankie is a bit like Lars in this respect, in that uh, yeah, like I said, that in different contexts he doesn't seem introverted, but I don't think I have a character like Frankie who hides certain things about his life, because uh, well, actually, I don't know, does Yngvar count as not talking about himself because he hides things that are unpleasant?
Kind of, I think so. How about Eyolf? I know he's not introverted at all, but he definitely hides things about himself.
in spite of not being introverted, Eyolf hides his past because he wants to seem something different than he is. I think it's definitely not introversion, but it's some insecurity that some of my introverted characters also share. So he's definitely insecure about his humble origins, and about that station in life that was he was born in, and that he struggled so hard to overcome through ambition and through how enterprising he was, and with his social skills most of all. So for some reason he really wants people to not know how he began. Even though that rags to riches story might be interesting, he wants to seem that he was always um, that he was, I don't know, more privileged than he actually was, that he never started so low. Because I think that deep down he is afraid that people who are more privileged would never see him as being at their level, and he is mostly insecure with someone like Yngvar, who acts so high and mighty, and when he's faced with people like that, um, who act kind of arrogant, um, and this is what triggers his insecurity. This is perhaps the only insecurity that he has. So
Mm-hmm.
this is the only way in which he doesn't like talking about himself, because he doesn't want people to know his past. He starts his life story sometime at 13, when he is discovered by his mentor, the witch, the vulva, who helps him become what he is, and he just disregards everything that led up to that.
Mm-hmm.
He is sort of ashamed about some things that he did. He justifies them, but he's still ashamed. He doesn't want his followers to know. He, I think that this is because he always saw himself as deserving more than he got in life, more than the hand he was dealt.
Mm-hmm.
So he wants to pretend that he was always uh, higher than he actually was.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. He's very performative, I think. He's hiding things for a different reason than Frankie is. I think Frankie isn't trying to craft an image per se. He just wants to make himself look more normal, quote unquote. But I think Eyolf is doing this to craft an image for himself so he can sell himself better.
Yes, definitely. So in a way, he does something that Sam does as well, but in a different way, because Sam doesn't hide. So well, actually, he does hide, right? With people that he doesn't really know, like at parties or something. Sometimes he hides certain things about himself, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm. I think he does, especially depending on what routes of the visual novel we're taking. There are routes where he chooses to use the name Sam Raimi in order to make himself seem, quote unquote, more like mainstream American. And he does this because a lot of people in old Hollywood, for example, Paul Muni and Edward G. Robinson, as I discussed in the episode of Tate last week about Yiddish theater, they used these names to make themselves more palatable to the American audience at large. So that was what I was trying to convey with Sam using the name Sam Raimi instead of Sam Abramov.
I see. So it is in a way a strategy.
Mm-hmm, it is.
That's interesting because yeah, it's with Eyolf, it is definitely a strategy to sell his image better. So yeah, I think that they do have this thing in common, even though it manifests in quite a different way.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Mm. I see. I see. So, do you have any other character who hides his past or parts of himself, or is just Sam and Frankie, and for different reasons? So, would, for example, Katya be open about talking about her family and the poverty and the struggles?
Very good question. I think she prefers not to talk about it because it raises some bad memories and she's afraid of having an overly emotional reaction. But I think she's open to talking about it to people she trusts, but definitely not to be used as a political thing. Like if Joel asked her to talk about her experiences in front of a bunch of people in the union, I don't think she would feel comfortable with it because it feels like her experience is being commoditized.
Oh, I see. That's a very good point. So she isn't ashamed about her past and about her background in the way that Aelf is, but at the same time, she feels like those things are too intimate for her to be used in that way. So she
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't like to become the image of the working woman or something.
Exactly. And she doesn't think that she doesn't have enough anger. I think if she was more like Joel, she would talk about it openly as a way of attacking the injustices that she's had to face. Like she would talk about her experiences to attack the system and she wouldn't feel commoditized, but as Katya is right now, as someone who's sad more than angry and not indignant like Joel is, she wouldn't want to commoditize her experiences.
I see, but you wouldn't judge someone else who is doing that, right?
I don't think she would. I think she realizes it's very personal.
I see, I see. Yeah, that's really interesting because but in a way she wants people to talk about the condition of the working class, but at the same time she doesn't want to be the one to do it because she would probably have an emotional reaction to it, and she doesn't want to reveal so many things that she finds personal.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
I see, that's interesting.
So do you have any other introverted characters you feel like has a comparison to mine?
Other than the ones I mentioned, um, well, I'm not really sure if I'm not really sure if Valdez counts as introverted, but well, definitely she's the kind of person who likes being with herself and with her family and not with other people, and just interacts with other people because she has to, because her job requires her to. But she's not as introverted as Yngvar, would not do that job in the first place because it requires too much
Okay.
interaction, and especially physical interaction. I didn't mention this before, but you know, Ingvar has this is reticence to be touched and any kind of physical contact with people. So this is what he would really hate about being a doctor, a healer.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one way in which his mother is not as introverted, because she never thinks about it in that way. But
Mm-hmm.
she definitely doesn't like making small talk. So she's not like Aelf is, right? When people come to ask for advice and come to talk about their problems, because well, they both are sort of therapists. But Aelf is a much better therapist because he can immediately cheer people up, and he listens to their problems and gives advice, and he's also quite a bit of a gossip. So he is very interested in people's lives and what they have to say. He doesn't always remember what they said. This is why he has his assistant who constantly reminds, you know, this is the guy who had like 3 mistresses, and he argued with, I don't know, with his neighbor over land, and then he remembers. So but he likes assimilating a lot of information about people and giving advice, whereas Valdez isn't the type of person to make small talk. So if you have a problem and you come to her, she will heal you, but she will not say anything more than what she has to say. And she doesn't really care about people's emotional problems. You know, she would probably just give her professional opinion, and that's that. And then next, you know.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. So do you have any advice that you would like to give to anyone who is currently writing an introverted character and may have some problems channeling how how to express this character's thoughts and feelings, especially if they feel very uncommunicative?
Well, yes, I think that this can be this barrier that can um, surface between the character and the outside world, or even the character you're trying to write and you as a writer, is that this part about thinking of their thoughts and trying to put their thoughts on paper and start from that, and then decide once you can really hear their voice, then decide how they actually interact with other people and what their voice is when they use it out loud. So just start by deciding what they think. Maybe writing in a first person perspective really helps, because even if you don't want to if you don't want the final narration to be in first person, you can just do it as an exercise to practice the character's voice, because with introverted people and with this silent type of characters, it's sometimes difficult to find their voice because they don't say as much. But once
Mm-hmm.
you have their thoughts on something, you can just uh, cut to the essential, and then that essential thing is the only thing that they say, and
Mm-hmm.
decide which of these things would they say out loud and which of these things they would be too uncomfortable to say and they would keep for themselves. So this is one thing. And so I think that introverted characters give a good opportunity to play with perspectives. So you can very well choose third person omniscient and just feed the reader with what they actually think, or you can just use a sort of a selective omniscience where you don't hear their thoughts, but you see the way they act, and people can draw conclusions about what they think.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really great idea, because next time we may be talking with Tete about how to approach one of the characters that she's been having problems with, who is Gleb from A White Crow Rides a Black Horse, which is, he's one of the Cossacks that she's writing about, and he's from the 18th century. He's a very quiet and stoic man who she's been having problems, quote, communicating with, because she doesn't know how to put his thoughts and experiences into words. She knows what his plot is and what actions he's going to take and what he does and what he stands for, but he doesn't come alive as a character to her. So I think, it will be very interesting to explore with her how to explore Gleb and share more of our experiences fleshing out introverted characters with Tete.
That's right. I'm really looking forward to that, because as I said, it's one of my interests, exploring the wide spectrum that introversion is in fictional characters. So of course I would very much love to take part in that conversation.
All right. Thank you so much again for today.
Thank you for having me. I had a great time. I'll see you next time.
See you. Bye.
Bye.